The Bear by William Faulkner. He was 10, but it had already begun, long before that day, when at last he wrote his age in two figures, and he saw for the first time the camp where his father and Major Despain and old General Compson and the others spent 2 weeks each November and 2 weeks again each June. He had already inherited then, without ever having seen it, the tremendous bear with one trap-ruined foot, which, in an area almost 100 miles deep, had earned itself a name, a definite designation, like a living man. He had listened to it for years, the long legend of corn cribs rifled, of shoats and grown pigs and even calves carried bodily into the woods and devoured, of traps and deadfalls overthrown, and dogs mangled and slain, and shotgun and even rifle charges delivered at point-blank range and with no more effect than so many peas blown through a tube by a boy, a corridor of wreckage and destruction beginning back before he was born, through which sped, not fast, but rather with the ruthless and irresistible deliberation of a locomotive, the shaggy, tremendous shape. It ran in his knowledge before he ever saw it. It looked and towered in his dreams before he even saw the unaxed woods where it left its crooked print, shaggy, huge, red-eyed, not malevolent, but just big. Too big for the dogs which tried to bay it, for the horses which tried to ride it down, for the men and the bullets they fired into it. Too big for the very country which was its constricting scope. He seemed to see it entire with a child's complete divination before he ever laid eyes on either. The doomed wilderness whose edges were being constantly and punily gnawed at by men with axes and plows who feared it because it was wilderness, men myriad and nameless even to one another in the land where the old bear had earned a name, through which ran not even a mortal animal but an anachronism, indomitable and invincible, out of an old dead time, a phantom, epitome and apotheosis of the old wild life at which the puny humans swarmed and hacked in a fury of abhorrence and fear, like pygmies about the ankles of a drowsing elephant. The old bear solitary, indomitable, and alone, widowered, childless, and absolved to mortality. Old Priam reft of his old wife and having outlived all his sons. Until he was 10, each November he would watch the wagon containing the dogs and the bedding and food and guns, and his father, and Tenny's Jim, the Negro, and Sam Fathers, the Indian, son of a slave woman and a Chickasaw chief, depart on the road to town, to Jefferson, where Major Despain and the others would join them. To the boy, at 7, 8, and 9, they were not going into the big bottom to hunt bear and deer, but to keep yearly rendezvous with the bear, which they did not even intend to kill. 2 weeks later they would return with no trophy, no head, and skin. He had not expected it. He had not even been afraid it would be in the wagon. He believed that even after he was 10 and his father would let him go too, for those 2 weeks in November, he would merely make another one, along with his father and Major Despain and General Compson and the others, the dogs which feared to bay at it, and the rifles and shotguns which failed even to bleed it, in the yearly pageant of the old bear's furious immortality. Then he heard the dogs. It was in the second week of his first time in the camp. He stood with Sam Fathers against a big oak beside the faint crossing where they had stood each dawn for 9 days now, hearing the dogs. He had heard them once before, one morning last week, a murmur, sourceless, echoing through the wet woods, swelling presently into separate voices which he could recognize and call by name. He had raised and cocked his gun, as Sam told him, and stood motionless again while the uproar, the invisible course, swept up and passed and faded. It seemed to him that he could actually see the deer, the buck, blond, smoke-colored, elongated with speed, fleeing, vanishing the woods, the gray solitude, still ringing even when the cries of the dogs had died away. "Now let the hammers down," Sam said. "You knew they were not coming here too," he said. "Yes," Sam said. "I want you to learn how to do when you didn't shoot. It's after the chance for the bear or the deer has already come and gone that men and dogs get killed." "Anyway," he said, "it was just a deer." Then on the 10th morning he heard the dogs again, and he readied the too long, too heavy gun as Sam had taught him, before Sam even spoke. But this time it was no deer, no ringing chorus of dogs running strong on a free scent, but a moiling yapping an octave too high, with something more than indecision and even abjectness in it, not even moving very fast, taking a long time to pass completely out of hearing, leaving then somewhere in the air that echo, thin, slightly hysterical, abject, almost grieving, with no sense of a fleeing, unseen, smoke-colored grass-eating shape ahead of it, and Sam, who had taught him first of all to cock the gun and take position where he could see everywhere and then never move again, had himself moved up beside him. He could hear Sam breathing at his shoulder, and he could see the arced curve of the man's inhaling nostrils. "Ha," Sam said, "not even running, walking." "Old Ben," the boy said. "But up here," he cried, "way up here." "He'd do it every year," Sam said. "Once, maybe to see who in camp this time, if he can shoot or not, whether we got the dog yet that can bay and hold him. He'll take them to the river, then he'll send them back home. We may as well go back too, see how they look when they come back to camp." When they reached the camp, the hounds were already there, 10 of them crouching back under the kitchen, the boy and Sam squatting to peer back into the obscurity where they had huddled, quiet, the eyes luminous, glowing at them and vanishing, and no sound, only that effluvium of something more than dog, stronger than dog, and not just animal, just beast, because still there had been nothing in front of that abject and almost painful yapping save the solitude, the wilderness, so that when the 11th hound came in at noon, and with all the others watching, even old Uncle Ash, who called himself first a cook, Sam daubed the tattered ear and the raked shoulder with turpentine and axle grease. To the boy it was still no living creature, but the wilderness which, leaning for the moment down, had patted lightly once the hound's temerity. "Just like a man," Sam said, "just like folks. Put off as long as she could having to be brave, knowing all the time that sooner or later she would have to be brave to keep on living with herself, and knowing all the time beforehand what was going to happen to her when she done it." That afternoon, himself on the one-eyed wagon mule which did not mind the smell of blood nor, as they told him, of bear, and with Sam on the other one, they rode for more than 3 hours through the rapid shortening winter day. They followed no path, no trail even that he could see. Almost at once they were in a country which he had never seen before. Then he knew why Sam had made him ride the mule, which would not spook. The sound one stopped short, and tried to whirl and bolt even as Sam got down, blowing its breath, jerking and wrenching at the rein, while Sam held it, coaxing it forward with his voice, since he could not risk tying it, drawing it forward while the boy got down from the marred one. Then, standing beside Sam in the gloom of the dying afternoon, he looked down at the rotted, overturned log, gutted and scored with claw marks, and, in the wet earth beside it, the print of the enormous, warped, two-toed foot. He knew now what he had smelled when he peered under the kitchen where the dogs huddled. He realized for the first time that the bear which had run in his listening and loomed in his dreams since before he could remember to the contrary, and which, therefore, must have existed in the listening and dreams of his father and Major Despain and even old General Compson, too, before they began to remember in their turn, was a mortal animal, and that if they had departed for the camp each November without any actual hope of bringing its trophy back, it was not because it could not be slain, but because so far they had had no actual hope to. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll try tomorrow," Sam said. "We ain't got the dog yet." "We've got 11. They ran him this morning." "It won't need but one," Sam said. "He ain't here. Maybe he ain't nowhere. The only other way will be for him to run by accident over somebody that has a gun." "That wouldn't be me," the boys said. "It'll be Walter or Major." "It might," Sam said. "You watch close in the morning, because he's smart. That's how come he has lived this long. If he gets hemmed up and has to pick out somebody to run over, he will pick out you." "How?" the boys said. "How will he know?" He ceased. "You mean he already knows me, that I ain't never been here before, ain't had time to find out yet whether I—" He ceased again, looking at Sam, the old man whose face revealed nothing until it smiled. He said humbly, not even amazed, "It was me he was watching. I don't reckon he didn't need to come but once." The next morning, they left the camp 3 hours before daylight. They rode this time because it was too far to walk, even the dogs in the wagon. Again, the first gray light found him in a place which he had never seen before, where Sam had placed him and told him to stay and then departed. With the gun which was too big for him, which did not even belong to him but to Major Despain, and which he had fired only once, at a stump on the first day, to learn the recoil and how to reload it, he stood against a gum tree beside a little bayou whose black still water crept without movement out of a cane brake and crossed a small clearing and into a cane again, where invisible, a bird, the big woodpecker called Lord to God, clattered at a dead limb. It was a stand like any other, dissimilar only in incidentals to the one where he had stood each morning for 10 days, a territory new to him, yet no less familiar than that other one which, after almost 2 weeks, he had come to believe he knew a little. The same solitude, the same loneliness through which human beings had merely passed without altering it, leaving no mark, no scar, which looked exactly as it must have looked when the first ancestor of Sam Father's Chickasaw predecessors crept into it and looked about, club or stone axe or bone arrow drawn and poised, different only because, squatting at the edge of the kitchen, he smelled the hounds huddled and cringing beneath it, and saw the raked ear and shoulder of the one who, Sam said, had to be brave in order to live with herself, and saw yesterday in the earth beside the gutted log the print of the living foot. He heard no dogs at all. He never did hear them. He heard only the drumming of the woodpecker stop short off, and knew that the bear was looking at him. He never saw it. He did not know whether it was in front of him or behind him. He did not move, holding the useless gun, which he had not even had warning to cock, and which even now he did not cock, tasting in his saliva that taint as of brass, which he knew now because he had smelled it when he peered under the kitchen at the huddled dogs. Then it was gone. As abruptly as it had ceased, the woodpecker's dry, monotonous clatter set up again, and after a while he even believed he could hear the dogs, a murmur, scarce a sound even, which he had probably been hearing for some time before he ever remarked it, drifting into hearing and then out again, dying away. They came nowhere near him. If it was a bear they ran, it was another bear. It was Sam himself who came out of the cane and crossed the bayou, followed by the injured bitch of yesterday. She was almost at heel, like a bird dog, making no sound. She came and crouched against his leg, trembling, staring off into the cane. "I didn't see him," he said. "I didn't, Sam." "I know it," Sam said. He done the looking. "You didn't hear him neither, did you?" "No," the boy said. "He's smart," Sam said. "Too smart." He looked down at the hound, trembling faintly and steadily against the boy's knee. From the rake's shoulder, a few drops of fresh blood oozed and clung. "Too big. We ain't got the dog yet. But maybe someday. Maybe not next time. But someday." "So I must see him," he thought. "I must look at him." Otherwise, it seemed to him that it would go on like this forever, as it had gone on with his father and Major Despain, who was older than his father, and even with old General Compson, who had been old enough to be a brigade commander in 1865. Otherwise, it would go on so forever, next time and next time, after and after and after. It seemed to him that he could never see the two of them, himself and the bear, shadowy in the limbo from which time emerged, becoming time, the old bear absolved of mortality, and himself partaking, sharing a little of it, enough of it. And he knew now what he had smelled in the huddled dogs and tasted in his saliva. He recognized fear. "So I will have to see him," he thought, without dread or even hope. "I will have to look at him." It was in June of the next year. He was 11. They were in camp again, celebrating Major Despain's and General Compson's birthdays. Although the one had been born in September and the other in the depth of winter and in another decade, they had met for 2 weeks to fish and shoot squirrels and turkeys and run coons and wildcats with the dogs at night. That is, he and Boone, Hagenbach, and the Negroes fished and shot squirrels and ran the coons and cats because they proved hunters. Not only Major Despain and old General Compson, who spent those 2 weeks sitting in a rocking chair before a tremendous iron pot of Brunswick stew, stirring and tasting, with old Ash to quarrel with about how he was making it, and Tinny Jims to pour whiskey from the demijohn into the tin dipper from which he drank it. But even the boy's father and Walter Ewell, who were still young enough, scorned such, other than shooting the old wild gobblers with pistols for wagers on their marksmanship. Or, that is, his father and the others believed he was hunting squirrels. Until the third day, he thought that Sam Fathers believed that too. Each morning he would leave the camp right after breakfast. He had his own gun now, a Christmas present. He went back to the tree beside the bayou where he had stood that morning. Using the compass which old General Compson had given him, he ranged from that point. He was teaching himself to be a better-than-fair woodsman without knowing he was doing it. On the second day, he even found the gutted log where he had first seen the crooked print. It was almost completely crumbled now, healing with unbelievable speed, a passionate and almost visible relinquishment back into the earth from which the tree had grown. He ranged the summer woods now, green with gloom, if anything, actually dimmer than in November's gray dissolution, where, even at noon, the sun fell only in intermittent dappling upon the earth, which never completely dried out and which crawled with snakes, moccasins and water snakes and rattlers, themselves the color of the dappling gloom, so that he would not always see them until they moved, returning later and later. First day, second day, passing in the twilight of the third evening the little log pen enclosing the log stable where Sam was putting up the horses for the night. "You ain't looked right yet," Sam said. He stopped. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said peacefully, in a peaceful rushing burst as when a boy's miniature dam in a little brook gives way. "All right, but how? I went to the bayou. I even found that log again. I reckon that was all right. Likely he's been watching you. You never saw his foot?" The boy said. "I didn't. I never thought." "It's the gun," Sam said. He stood beside the fence motionless, the old man, the Indian, in the battered, faded overalls and the 5-cent straw hat, which in the Negro's race had been the badge of his enslavement and was now the regalia of his freedom. The camp, the clearing, the house, the barn, and its tiny lot with which Major Despain in his turn had scratched punily and evanescently at the wilderness, faded in the dusk, back into the immemorial darkness of the woods. The gun, the boy thought. The gun. "Be scared," Sam said. "You can't help that. But don't be afraid. Ain't nothing in the woods going to hurt you unless you corner it or it smells that you are afraid. A bear or a deer, too, has got to be scared of a coward the same as a brave man has got to be." The gun, the boy thought. "You will have to choose," Sam said. He left the camp before daylight, long before Uncle Ash would waken his quilts on the kitchen floor and start the fire for breakfast. He had only the compass and a stick for snakes. He could go almost a mile before he would begin to need the compass. He sat on a log, the invisible compass in his invisible hand, while the secret night sounds, fallen still at his movements, scurried again and then ceased for good, and the owls ceased and gave over to the waking of daybirds, and he could see the compass. Then he went fast, yet still quietly. He was becoming better and better as a woodsman, still without having yet realized it. He jumped a doe and fawn at sunrise, walked them out of the bed, close enough to see them, the crash of undergrowth, the white scut, the fawn scudding behind her faster than he had believed it could run. He was hunting right, upwind as Sam had taught him. Not that it mattered now. He had left the gun. Of his own will and relinquishment, he had accepted not a gambit, not a choice, but a condition in which not only the bear's heretofore inviolable anonymity, but all the old rules and balances of hunter and hunted had been abrogated. He would not even be afraid, not even in the moment when the fear would take him completely. Blood, skin, bowels, bones, memory from the long time before it became his memory, all save that thin, clear, immortal lucidity, which alone differed him from this bear and from all other bear and deer he would ever kill, in the humility and pride of his skill and endurance, to which Sam had spoken when he leaned in the twilight on the lot fence yesterday. By noon, he was far beyond the little bayou, farther into the new and alien country than he had ever been. He was traveling now, not only by the old, heavy, biscuit-thick silver watch which had belonged to his grandfather. When he stopped at last, it was for the first time since he had risen from the log at dawn when he could see the compass. It was far enough. He had left the camp 9 hours ago. 9 hours from now, dark would have already been an hour old, but he didn't think that. He thought, all right, yes, but what? And stood for a moment, alien and small in the green and topless solitude, answering his own question before it had formed and ceased. It was the watch, the compass, the stick, the 3 lifeless mechanicals with which for 9 hours he had fended the wilderness off. He hung the watch and compass carefully on a bush and leaned the stick beside them and relinquished completely to it. He had not been going very fast for the last 2 or 3 hours. He went no faster now, since distance would not matter, even if he could have gone fast. And he was trying to keep a bearing on the tree where he had left the compass, trying to complete a circle which would bring him back to it, or at least intersect itself, since direction would not matter now either. But the tree was not there, and he did as Sam had schooled him, made the next circle in the opposite direction, so that the 2 patterns would bisect somewhere, but crossing no print of his own feet, finding the tree at last, but in the wrong place. No bush, no compass, no watch. And the tree not even the tree, because there was a down log beside it, and he did what Sam Fathers had told him was the next thing and the last. As he sat down on the log, he saw the crooked print, the warped, tremendous 2-toed indentation, which even as he watched it, filled with water. As he looked up, the wilderness coalesced, solidified. The glade, the tree he sought, the bush, the watch, and the compass glinting where a ray of sunshine touched them. Then he saw the bear. It did not appear. It was just there, immobile, solid, fixed in the hot dappling of the green and windless noon, not as big as he had dreamed it, but as big as he had expected it, bigger, dimensionless, against the dappled obscurity, looking at him where he sat quietly on the log and looked back at it. Then it moved. It made no sound. It did not hurry. It crossed the glade, walking for an instant into the full glare of the sun. When it reached the other side, it stopped again and looked back at him across one shoulder while his quiet breathing inhaled and exhaled 3 times. Then it was gone. It didn't walk into the woods, the undergrowth. It faded, sank back into the wilderness as he had watched a fish, a huge old bass, sink and vanish into the dark depths of its pool without even any movement of its fins. He thought, it will be next fall. But it was not next fall, nor the next, nor the next. He was 14 then. He had killed his buck, and Sam Fathers had marked his face with the hot blood, and in the next year he killed a bear. But even before that accolade, he had become as competent in the woods as many grown men with the same experience. By his 14th year, he was a better woodsman than most grown men with more. There was no territory within 30 miles of the camp that he did not know. Bayou, ridge, break, landmark, tree, and path. He could have led anyone to any point in it without deviation and brought them out again. He knew the game trails that even Sam Fathers did not know. In his 13th year, he found a Buck's betting place, and unbeknown to his father, he borrowed Walter Ewell's rifle and lay in wait at dawn and killed the buck when it walked back to the bed, as Sam had told him how the old Chickasaw fathers did. But not the old bear, although by now he knew its footprints better than he did his own, and not only the crooked one. He could see any one of the three sound ones and distinguish it from any other, and not only by its size. There were other bears within these 30 miles which left tracks almost as large, but this was more than that. If Sam Fathers had been his mentor and the backyard rabbits and squirrels at his home his kindergarten, then the wilderness the old bear ran was his college. The old male bear itself, so long unwifed and childless as to have become its own ungendered progenitor, was his alma mater. But he never saw it. He could find the crooked print now almost whenever he liked. 15 or 10 or 5 miles, or sometimes nearer the camp than that. Twice, while on stand during the 3 years, he heard the dogs strike its trail by accident. On the second time, they jumped it seemingly, the voices high, abject, almost human in hysteria, as on that first morning 2 years ago, but not the bear itself. He would remember that noon 3 years ago, the glade, himself and the bear, fixed during that moment in the windless and dappled blaze, and it would seem to him that it had never happened, that he had dreamed that too. But it had happened. They had looked at each other. They had emerged from the wilderness old as earth, synchronized to the instant by something more than the blood that moved, the flesh and bones which bore them and touched, pledged something, affirmed something more lasting than the frail web of bones and flesh which any accident could obliterate. Then he saw it again. Because of the very fact that he thought of nothing else, he had forgotten to look for it. He was still hunting with Walter Ewell's rifle. He saw it cross the end of a long blowdown, a corridor where a tornado had swept, rushing through rather than over the tangle of trunks and branches as a locomotive would have, faster than he had ever believed it could move, almost as fast as a deer even, because a deer would have spent most of that time in the air, faster than he could bring the rifle sights up with it, and now he knew what had been wrong during all the 3 years. He sat on a log, shaking and trembling as if he had never seen the woods before, nor anything that ran them, wondering with incredulous amazement how he could have forgotten the very thing which Sam Fathers had told him, and which the bear itself had proved the next day, and had now returned, after 3 years, to reaffirm. And now he knew what Sam Fathers had meant about the right dog, a dog in which size would mean less than nothing. So when he returned alone in April, school was out then, so that the sons of farmers could help with the land's planting, and at last his father had granted him permission. On his promise to be back in 4 days, he had the dog. It was his own, a mongrel of the sort called by Negroes a feis, a ratter, itself not much bigger than a rat, and possessing that bravery which had long since stopped being courage and had become foolhardiness. It did not take 4 days. Alone again, he found the trail on the first morning. It was not a stalk. It was an ambush. He timed the meeting almost as if it were an appointment with a human being. Himself holding the feis muffled in the feed sack, and Sam Fathers with 2 of the hounds on a piece of plowing rope, they lay downwind of the trail at dawn of the second morning. They were so close that the bear turned without even running, as if in surprised amazement at the shrill and frantic uproar of the released feis, turning at bay against the trunk of a tree on its hind feet. It seemed to the boy that it would never stop rising, taller and taller, and even the 2 hounds seemed to take a desperate and despairing courage from the feis, following it as it went in. Then he realized that the feis was actually not going to stop. He flung, threw the gun away, and ran. When he overtook and grasped the frantically pinwheeling little dog, it seemed to him that he was directly under the bear. He could smell it, strong and hot and rank, Sprawling, he looked up to where it loomed and towered over him like a cloudburst and colored like a thunderclap, quite familiar, peacefully and even lucidly familiar, until he remembered. This was the way he had used to dream about it. Then it was gone. He didn't see it go. He knelt, holding the frantic vice with both hands, hearing the abashed wailing of the hounds drawing farther and farther away, until Sam came up. He carried the gun. He laid it down quietly beside the boy and stood looking down at him. "You've done seed him twice now with a gun in your hands," he said. "This time you couldn't have missed him." The boy rose. He still held the vice. Even in his arms and clear of the ground, it yapped frantically, straining and surging after the fading uproar of the two hounds like a tangle of wire springs. He was panting a little, but he was neither shaking nor trembling now. "Neither could you," he said. "You had the gun, neither did you." "And you didn't shoot," his father said. "How close were you?" "I don't know, sir," he said. There was a big wood tick inside his right hind leg. "I saw that, but I didn't have the gun then." "But you didn't shoot when you had the gun," his father said. "Why?" But he didn't answer, and his father didn't wait for him to. Rising and crossing the room, across the pelt of the bear which the boy had killed 2 years ago, and the larger one which his father had killed before he was born, to the bookcase beneath the mounted head of the boy's first buck. It was the room which his father called the office, from which all the plantation business was transacted. In it, for the 14 years of his life, he had heard the best of all talking. Major Despain would be there, and sometimes old General Compson, and Walter Ewell, and Boone Hagenbeck, and Sam Fathers, and Tenny's Jim, too, were hunters, knew the woods, and what ran them. He would hear it, not talking himself, but listening. The wilderness, the big woods, bigger and older than any recorded document of white man fatuous enough to believe he had bought any fragment of it, or Indian ruthless enough to pretend that any fragment of it had been his to convey. It was of the men, not white, nor black, nor red, but men, hunters with the will and hardihood to endure, and the humility and skill to survive, and the dogs and the bear and deer juxtaposed and relieved against it, ordered and compelled by, and within the wilderness, in the ancient and unremitting contest by the ancient and immitigable rules which voided all regrets and brooked no quarter, the voices quiet and weighty and deliberate for retrospection and recollection and exact remembering, while he squatted in the blazing firelight as Tenny's Jim squatted, who stirred only to put more wood on the fire and to pass the bottle from one glass to another. Because the bottle was always present, so that after a while it seemed to him that those fierce instants of heart and brain and courage and willingness and speed were concentrated and distilled into that brown liquor, which not women, not boys and children, but only hunters drank, drinking not of the blood they had spilled, but some condensation of the wild immortal spirit, drinking it moderately, humbly even, not with the pagan's base hope of acquiring the virtues of cunning and strength and speed, but in salute to them. His father returned with the book and sat down again and opened it. "Listen," he said. He read the 5 stanzas aloud, his voice quiet and deliberate in the room where there was no fire now because it was already spring. Then he looked up. The boy watched him. "All right," his father said. "Listen." He read again, but only the 2nd stanza, this time to the end of it, the last 2 lines, and closed the book and put it on the table beside him. "She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair," he said. "He's talking about a girl," the boy said. "He had to talk about something," his father said. Then he said, "He was talking about truth. Truth doesn't change. Truth is one thing. It covers all things which touch the heart, honor and pride and pity and justice and courage and love. Do you see now?" He didn't know. Somehow it was simpler than that. There was an old bear, fierce and ruthless, not merely just to stay alive, but with the fierce pride of liberty and freedom, proud enough of the liberty and freedom to see it threatened without fear or even alarm. Nay, who at times even seemed deliberately to put that freedom and liberty in jeopardy in order to savor them, to remind his old strong bones and flesh to keep supple and quick to defend and preserve them. There was an old man, son of a Negro slave and an Indian king, inheritor on the one side of the long chronicle of a people who had learned humility and through suffering and pride through the endurance which survived the suffering and injustice, and on the other side, the chronicle of a people even longer in the land than the first, yet who no longer existed in the land at all, save in the solitary brotherhood of an old Negro's alien blood and the wild and invincible spirit of an old bear. There was a boy who wished to learn humility and pride in order to become skillful and worthy in the woods, who suddenly found himself becoming so skillful, so rapidly that he feared he would ever become worthy, because he had not learned humility and pride, although he had tried to, until one day, and as suddenly he discovered that an old man who could not have defined either had led him, as though by the hand, to that point where an old bear and a little mongrel of a dog showed him that, by possessing one thing other, he would possess them both. And a little dog, nameless and mongrel and many-fathered, grown, yet weighing less than 6 pounds, saying as if to itself, "I can't be dangerous, because there's nothing much smaller than I am. I can't be fierce, because they would call it just a noise. I can't be humble, because I'm already too close to the ground to genuflect. I can't be proud, because I wouldn't be near enough to it for anyone to know who is casting the shadow. And I don't even know that I'm not going to heaven, because they have already decided that I don't possess an immortal soul. So all I can be is brave. But it's all right. I can be that, even if they still call it just noise." That was all. It was simple, much simpler than somebody talking in a book about youth and a girl he would never need to grieve over, because he could never approach any nearer her and would never have to get any farther away. He had heard about a bear and finally got big enough to trail it, and he trailed it 4 years and at last met it with a gun in his hands, and he didn't shoot because a little dog, but he could have shot long before the little dog covered the 20 yards to where the bear waited, and Sam Fathers could have shot at any time during that interminable minute while old Ben stood on his hind feet over them. He stopped. His father was watching him gravely across the spring-rife twilight of the room. When he spoke, his words were as quiet as the twilight, too, not loud, because they did not need to be, because they would last. "Courage and honor and pride," his father said, "and pity and love of justice and of liberty. They all touch the heart, and what the heart holds to becomes truth, as far as we know the truth. Do you see now? Sam and old Ben and Nip," he thought, and himself too. He had been all right too. His father had said so. "Yes, sir," he said.